Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Victoria Chester-Rose, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at RQM Plus. As part of RQM Plus's commitment to women health and medtech innovation, I'm honored to moderate a very special panel discussion today, When Personal and Professional Missions Align. The stories you're about to hear today are deeply personal and incredibly impactful, as we bring together colleagues who have bravely battled breast cancer and one of our own experts who will provide insights into the latest developments in diagnostics and treatment. Our role in medtech innovation allows us to be on the forefront of improving early detection, treatment, and patient outcomes. I want to first start with a hard truth. Globally, 2.3 million women are diagnosed with breast cancer each year. Today, you're going to hear the stories of strength, resilience, and scientific progress, demonstrating how personal and professional missions align to make a meaningful difference. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their personal and expert experiences, helping shed light on how innovation continues to shape the future of breast cancer care. With that, let's begin this important conversation. So before we get into the heart of today's discussion, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself and share your role at RQM Plus.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction, Vicki. My name is Bethany Chung. I'm a senior manager and help lead the clinical and post-market practice in our consulting services portion of RQM Plus.
And hi, everyone. My name's Catherine Heng. I am a consultant here at RQM Plus. I'm a senior principal consultant, and I work in the regulatory space here at RQM Plus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Gonting, and I am a senior regulatory consultant. And for over 8 years, I've been supporting companies, both big and small, all over the world, helping them get their medical devices to the U.S. market. I've been working with RQM Plus working with the team for about 3 years now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Davidson. I'm a project accountant too here at RQM Plus. I've been here for almost 3 years, and I work primarily in the trial space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Rogers. I'm the Director of Client Financial Management at RQM Plus. I've been with RQM Plus for just about 11 years now and supporting all of our finance operations.
Great. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Before we dive into each of you reflecting on your personal journey, I found an interesting statistic over the weekend as I was doing more research. That approximately 7% of all breast cancer cases are diagnosed for women under 40, which the number seems low. And I know here with this panel, that's not necessarily the case. So I'd love to hear if you wouldn't mind sharing your personal stories and reflecting on how you first discovered you had breast cancer.
Started seeing my current OBGYN when I was about 28, 29 years old. And from the first time that I started seeing her, she was like, "Oh, you have a family history of breast cancer. I'd like you just to get like a baseline mammogram." But at the time I was more focused on having kids. I had just gotten married. We just got a house. We just moved down to Maryland from New Hampshire. So I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that eventually. So for the next probably 8 or 9 years, I was pregnant, breastfeeding, one after another. And every year she would ask, "Are you still breastfeeding? Is it time to get that mammogram yet?" "No." "Okay, so we'll put it off another year." So, by the time I was 37 and my youngest, my daughter, was 3 years old, had the same routine. "Are you still breastfeeding?" Like, "Well, yeah, but only about once a week or so." And she said, "Oh, great. It's time to get that mammogram." And I thought, I'm only 37. This seems so soon. I'll take the script and I'll get it sometime in the next year before I see her again when my daughter stops breastfeeding. And they had moved to electronic referrals at that time. So it all went through. I didn't have to do anything. The radiology center called me and said, "Let's get your mammogram scheduled." And I'm like, "Oh, all right. Well, I'm still breastfeeding. Is that okay?" They're like, "Yeah, it's fine. We'll tell the radiologist, we'll tell the tech." So I went in and I had my mammogram, and the entire time the tech said, like, don't worry if they call you back. This is your first one. If they call you back for a second look, that's completely normal. Don't worry about it. So when they did call me back for a second look, didn't think twice about it. I wasn't worried about it. But, you know, when they did the second look, they're like, well, we actually think we need to schedule a biopsy for you. And that was a little bit of a shock. But at the same time, you know, I talked to a friend of mine who is a radiologist, and she said that's just one of the outcomes that can come from this. About 80% of biopsies turn out to be negative. These are the stats. You know, I just want to let you know ahead of time. So I went into the biopsy thinking, all right, well, 80% of these are negative. I'm still breastfeeding. I'm sure it's just some sort of anomaly. And when, you know, I got the biopsy done and the radiologist called me a few days later and told me it was cancer, I was like, I'm too young. Like, this doesn't happen for 37-year-olds. So I think that statistic that you said, Vicky, is what everyone hears. But my experience and what I'm seeing, you know, among other, you know, parents of my kids' friends, for example, is not the case. I personally am seeing more and more women under the age of 40 end up positive with breast cancer.
Thank you for sharing that, Bethany.
Yeah,
Heather,
I was. No, go ahead. No, Heather.
Heather, do you mind if we go to you?
Yeah. Yep. So I was always very active. I worked out a lot, and I found a lump on my right side that was not like a small pea like you would expect. It was node-like, and it was like inches long. So I had mentioned it to my boyfriend, and we both felt it, and it kind of felt like muscle, and it was really close to like my armpit and my side of my chest area. So we wrote it off for months until my nipples started bleeding one day on Mother's Day, and I again wrote it off for a couple more days, and then I thought, this is probably something that's not normal. So I went to my OB, and she was like, it's probably just a cyst. I'm not worried, but I'll send you for an ultrasound and just call this number. So as soon as I got in the car, I called the number, and they weren't worried. They said, we can get you in like a month. So I went home, again, not worried or concerned, until I actually talked to JR. And because of our experiences, she pushed me to get in. So I called and was able to get in the very next day. And when I went to that ultrasound, I was not worried at all until I was laying in the room, and it was just very silent. And there were two radiologists just staring at the screen and just clicking and taking pictures and clicking and taking more pictures. And I was just laying there, and I started having tears like fall out of my eyes. And then she's like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm very concerned with what I see. And that was when I was like freaked out. And they sent me for a biopsy 2 days later. Went to the biopsy, and within a week they diagnosed me with DCIS, stage 0. So
Thank you, Heather, for sharing that. All right, Erin, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was a little bit more like Bethany. So I was diagnosed with stage 2 triple positive breast cancer in 2017 when I was just 38 years old. So at that point, I'm from the US, but I'd been living in the UK for about 5 years at that point. And so I discovered the lump in my left breast while I was breastfeeding my second daughter. And initially I thought it was a blocked milk duct. Sort of had that same sort of feel. And given that my little one was a year old, it struck me as a bit odd that I would have a blocked duct so far into our breastfeeding journey. And so while I brushed it off for about a week or so, I thought, it's better to be safe than sorry. I'll just go in, make sure that there's nothing going on. And I went in and saw my doctor, and she's like, I'm not worried, but I can't promise you that it's not something to be concerned about. And so she escalated my concern to the folks at the hospital. We have a great breast clinic. They call it sort of a one-stop shop where they can kind of do all the testing they need to do in order to put your mind at ease if it's nothing, or to figure out what's going on if there needs to be action taken. And so I went to the hospital, and again, every time someone looked at it, they're like, it's probably nothing, but we'll just keep going, and we'll make sure that we figure out what's going on. And after I had my biopsy, they had me come back in, and I remember sitting in a little room. I remember asking, actually, when they told me to come back in, I said, should I bring someone with me? And they said that would be advisable. So I took my husband with me, and we were sitting there talking with the doctor, and it was, it's a shock to say the least to get a cancer diagnosis, but it was interesting. Sort of my initial reaction was, what's the plan? Right? Like, what do we do about this? I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and I needed the team there to sort of help me come up with a plan to get rid of the cancer. Like I needed to carry on, and I had so many questions, and I feel like one of the things throughout my entire treatment journey is having lots of questions and being able to ask lots of questions, and having them just be patient and answer. This is the first time I've ever done this. This is the first time I'd ever been through something like this, and they were very patient and kind, and answered all my questions. And and reflecting on sort of that initial diagnosis, I remember one of my questions was, we were about ready to walk out of the room. I said, what's my prognosis? Like, what am I looking at here? And the doctor asked me again how old my girls were, and I told him that they were 1 and 4. And I just remember him laughing and like sort of a chuckle and smiling at me and telling me that there was no way I was going to escape having to deal with 2 teenage girls. And I just remember, he'd been very candid, and very honest about sort of what I was going to be, sort of what I had in front of me, what I was going to be experiencing. But I just remember, throughout, during that conversation and throughout my journey, the kindness that people showed me, and the hope that I was given, that, it was going to be tough, but it's going to make it through. Like, it just keep going.
Would say my journey is somewhere between Bethany and Erin's. So I was 39 when I was diagnosed, but similar to both, I had been breastfeeding for several years. In my 20s, I had been told that I had dense tissue in my breast, and we thought we felt a lump. So I actually had my first mammogram in my 20s at that time. Everything came back looking fine, and they said no follow-up is needed. Fast forward to sometime in my mid-30s, just in my routine OB/GYN visits, just said, you know what, should we reconsider that? Should we think about looking at another mammogram? And they're like, sure, let's go ahead and do that. So thankfully, my OB/GYN was more than happy to write that script for me. But even after I had asked that question, I probably waited a year because I was still kind of off and on breastfeeding, kind of putting it off, just saying, oh, I probably have a little bit before I need to have that mammogram done. So I went, and thankfully everything looked fine again, but they said, we want to monitor this. So we continued to monitor. I would go like every 6 months for mammograms. I would get told, no change, everything looks fine. And then it was my last 6-month mammogram when I was 39, and I was heading into that over 40 age where I would just be on the annual trip. And when I went in for that last one, it was probably the first one I didn't take my husband to, because I was like, oh, this is just a non-event at this point. I went in, and at that point, that radiologist said, I think, why don't we just go ahead and send you for a biopsy? Let's just put it all to rest, and that way you don't have to worry about it. And I said, oh, that's great. Like, in my mind, I was thinking, this is a wonderful thing. Like, why did nobody just say this before? Because that makes total sense to me. Looking back, I'm guessing they were really concerned about what they saw during that appointment and that it had changed, but they didn't want to HD's point freak me out at that point. So I had gone for biopsy. I thought it's going to come back okay. I was definitely a little bit nervous, but very hopeful that it was this doesn't typically happen to those under 40. We've been monitoring it. It probably isn't anything, but I can still remember the day getting the phone call, standing at my front door, looking out the window because my 4 and 6 year old were playing in the other room. One had just gotten off the bus from his first year at kindergarten, and getting that call from the doctor, it's just saying, you do have breast cancer. And you just feel like everything goes numb almost. But knowing you have to hold it together because you have 2 small children in the other room was something that was very difficult to deal with. I remember picking up the phone after that call, calling my husband at work saying, this just happened. I think he put everything down, had people cover for him, and he was able to get home pretty quickly. But, and I think it was just that, to Erin's point, that care and concern started with that first phone call with that doctor saying, we are so sorry, but we are going to be with you. And they took the initiative to set me up with a phenomenal breast surgeon here in the Pittsburgh region. They took it upon themselves to get that call scheduled. Because I was under 40, I was lucky enough to be part of the young program in Pittsburgh at McGee, to be able to go in. It was a 2-week wait, but I went in and had all of my testing done. So an MRI, genetic testing, all kinds of panels done. And then I met with the breast surgeon that same day. So it was like a fast track through all of the testing that would need to occur so I could have it all done with the results and talk to the surgeon that day. Similar to Erin, I walked in and it's 2 weeks of knowing you have something, but not really knowing what does this mean. And her looking at me and having this conversation about what she's seeing and saying, like, you're going to be okay. Like, we're going to fix this. And it was the first time that I actually had that breath of, okay, like I can do this. It's not, I'm going to be here to see my kids. And so I think that was really a turning point. But I'm sure, as you'll hear from all of us, like those turning points, there's so many highs and so many lows through the journey where just when you feel like I've got this, then you turn around and maybe a week later, you get the note that I don't really love something, how this is looking in your lymph node. So there was a big low. So I had to go back in for a second biopsy on my lymph nodes. And again, you have this, oh my gosh, maybe it is worse than what we initially had thought that it was going to be. And so then you're waiting for results again. And thankfully for me, mine came back that it had not made it to my lymph node. It was just probably bruised from that first biopsy. So a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but through it all, just the support was unwavering from family, friends, doctors, colleagues, and everything.